Karoline Leavitt had always known that politics wasn't fair, but even she was surprised when the invitation arrived. A handwritten card, delivered by courier, embossed with the gold seal of the Liberty Forum. It was the most high-profile event of the year, an annual gathering where senators, media elites, and corporate power brokers mingled over champagne and smiles. And now they wanted her to speak. The youngest former White House press secretary in history. Conservative, outspoken, unapologetic. The note was brief. We invite you to share your thoughts on the future of American values. A short keynote, nothing formal, just honest conversation. Karoline narrowed her eyes. Something felt off. She knew how these circles worked. They didn't casually hand microphones to people like her, especially not when cameras were rolling and every soundbite could be twisted. Still, she said yes, because Karoline never ran from a challenge. She studied the invitation again. The location. The Hartwell Club. A private venue known for its marble halls, velvet drapes, and hidden agendas. A quick call to a trusted staffer confirmed her suspicion. Two panelists on the docket had strong liberal leanings, and one of them, Peter Huxley, had mocked her publicly during a recent news broadcast. "They're baiting you," her aide warned. "They want you to trip, to make you the headline, for the wrong reason." "I know," Karoline said with a calm smile. "That's why I'm going." What they didn't know was that Karoline had already begun preparing. Not just notes, not just talking points, but a strategy. She would walk into that room fully aware it was a trap, and she'd walk out with every camera pointed exactly where she wanted. The Hartwell Club was even more opulent than Karoline remembered. The chandeliers shimmered like frozen fireworks, casting a golden hue across a sea of tailored suits, sparkling jewelry, and practiced smiles. Karoline stepped inside with quiet confidence. Her black blazer was crisp, her notes neatly folded in her purse, but she knew better than to rely on paper. The real performance wouldn't be about facts. It would be about control. She scanned the room. There they were. 3 panelists already seated at the long mahogany table near the stage. 2 men in their 50s, 1 woman dressed in subtle designer arrogance. Peter Huxley was in the middle, sipping something brown from a crystal glass and already smirking. The moderator, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the casual arrogance of someone who thought he was the smartest man in every room, motioned for Karoline to join them. "Glad you made it," he said with a rehearsed grin. "We're keeping it friendly tonight." She smiled politely. "I'm always friendly." The audience began to settle. Press cameras buzzed. Journalists whispered to each other. Karoline could feel it. The setup. The stage was tilted. The questions wouldn't be neutral. The applause would be calculated. And still, she sat down with perfect posture, legs crossed, hands folded. Unshaken. The moderator cleared his throat. "Our first question tonight. What is the biggest threat to American values today?" He turned first to Peter Huxley, who wasted no time. "Extremism, from both sides, but especially the kind that comes from people who treat politics like performance art." He didn't look at her, but the crowd did. The woman on the panel chimed in, nodding. "Yes, and the glorification of public figures who value attention over truth." A few chuckles followed. Then the moderator turned to Karoline. "Ms. Leavitt, your thoughts?" She leaned forward slowly, letting the silence hang in the air. Then spoke. Not fast, not defensive, but measured. "I think the greatest threat to American values isn't disagreement. It's pretending that only one kind of voice deserves respect. I was invited here under the promise of conversation. If it turns into mockery, I'll be happy to step down and make room for someone more agreeable." The room went still. No one had expected that. Not from her. Peter shifted in his chair. Karoline smiled. Just a little. She had just reset the tone. The moderator tried to move on, but the room wasn't ready. Karoline's calm defiance had stirred something. An energy. A shift. The panelists exchanged glances, their opening jabs having bounced off her like dull darts. "Let's lighten things up," the moderator said, clearing his throat. "What gives you hope about the future?" This time, he went to the woman on the panel first. "Young people," she replied. "They're rejecting the past, looking forward." Peter nodded. "And I'd say hope lies in truth. Real journalism. Holding those in power accountable, even if they don't like it." Another veiled shot. Karoline didn't blink. When the question came to her, she spoke softly. "What gives me hope? The people who don't clap when it's easy? The ones who sit in rooms like this, unsure who to trust, and decide to listen anyway? Not to the loudest voice, but the one that dares to tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient." A hush fell. She didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. Her words cut clean. Peter Huxley leaned back, annoyed. He had expected fireworks, rants, right-wing buzzwords, anything he could sink his teeth into. Instead, she was giving them discipline. Karoline had a plan, and they were playing right into it. During the short break, a young woman in the audience leaned toward her colleague and whispered, "I thought she'd be louder, more dramatic." Her friend replied, "No, she's smarter than that. She's flipping the room." Karoline stood by the refreshment table, calm as ever. A junior journalist approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Leavitt, off the record, are you nervous?" Karoline gave a small smile. "Should I be?" The young man chuckled, shaking his head. "Honestly, I think they should be." From the corner of her eye, she saw Peter texting furiously. She could guess the tone. "This isn't going the way we planned." Karoline took a sip of water and returned to her seat. They'd invited her expecting spectacle. But she had brought strategy. And she was only just getting started. When the panel resumed, the tone had changed. Not for the better. For her rivals, at least. Peter Huxley was clearly losing patience. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered with poise. He thrived on shouting matches, sound bites, and hot takes. But Karoline wasn't giving him any of that. Instead, she was quietly winning the room. And he knew it. So he changed tactics. "Karoline," he said suddenly, breaking protocol by using her first name. "You speak so calmly about unity, but you worked for one of the most divisive presidents in American history. Should we take your message seriously, or as performance?" A murmur rippled through the room. There it was, the punch. And the cameras loved it. Karoline didn't flinch. She waited, long enough to make people uncomfortable, then leaned into her mic. "You're right. I did work for a president many people disagreed with. But disagreement isn't division. Division is when we stop listening altogether. And tonight, I came here not to erase our differences, but to prove we can still have them. And speak like adults." Soft applause, a few nods, even one or two smirks, of respect. But she wasn't finished. "You want performance, Peter? It's interrupting someone before they finish. It's framing every disagreement as moral failure. And it's assuming anyone who doesn't match your worldview is either dangerous or dumb." She turned to the audience. "I've been called both. I'm still standing." The room fell still again. No shouting, no rebuttal. Just quiet awareness that the youngest woman on that panel was commanding every second with grace. Peter chuckled awkwardly, tapping his pen against the table. "Touché." The moderator tried to steer things back to policy. Let's talk about education reform, he said, his voice slightly higher than before. But Karoline had already done something bigger than answer questions. She had disarmed an ambush without ever raising her voice, and now the audience was leaning toward her, not away. As the discussion shifted to education, Karoline remained poised, but she sensed an opening. The moderator, clearly rattled by how she'd handled the last exchange, turned to her with a faint smirk. "Ms. Leavitt, you've spoken a lot about fairness and listening. But what would you say to a student who feels silenced by the kind of politics you represent?" It was a trap, disguised as curiosity. Karoline knew that look. He wanted her to sound defensive, or worse, dismissive. Instead, she sat forward, placed both hands on the table, and locked eyes with the audience. "I'd say, I've been that student." The room tilted. "I've been the girl in the back of the classroom, afraid to speak up because my views weren't popular. I've had professors laugh at my questions. I've had classmates roll their eyes. I've been told I was too opinionated before I ever opened my mouth." Her voice was still even, but deeper now. Personal. "So I'd tell that student, your voice matters, even when others pretend it doesn't. Especially then." Silence. The moderator blinked. Even Peter Huxley leaned back, unsure of how to follow that. Karoline didn't let the moment go. "It's not about silencing others. It's about refusing to be silenced yourself. I don't want everyone to agree with me. I want them to know I'm not going anywhere." And in that instant, the energy in the room shifted again. Students in the audience leaned forward. Staffers stopped typing. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in just a little closer, because Karoline hadn't just made a point. She had made it personal. And suddenly, she wasn't the controversial panelist. She was relatable, real. The kind of leader people didn't just listen to, they rooted for. The moderator cleared his throat. "Thank you, Ms. Leavitt." Too late. She'd already won the moment. And the night wasn't over yet. As the panel moved toward closing remarks, the tension in the room had subtly flipped. What started as a quiet ambush now felt like a stage she owned. Karoline had answered every challenge not with noise, but with clarity. Backstage, a young media intern checked the live stream stats. One clip, Karoline's moment about feeling silenced in class, was already being clipped and reposted online. The title? She was supposed to fall apart. Instead, she spoke for all of us. It had 150,000 views before the panel even ended. Peter Huxley noticed. His eyes kept darting to his phone. He could see what was happening, and he hated it. The moment he thought would embarrass Karoline was becoming his most viewed appearance, for all the wrong reasons. The moderator turned to Karoline one final time. "Any last thoughts for the audience tonight?" She smiled gently, her tone warm but firm. "Just this. Disagreement isn't danger. Silence is. You don't have to like my views, but if you try to silence them, you only prove why they need to be heard." A pause. "So speak up, even when the room is against you. Especially then." The applause came slowly, then grew. Not thunderous, not staged. Real. The kind that starts from one corner of the room and spreads because people recognize courage when they hear it. Karoline stood, thanked the moderator, and walked off stage calmly. No mic drop, no performance, just presence. As she stepped into the hallway, a young woman stopped her. "Ms. Leavitt, I've never voted your way, but tonight I saw someone I respect." Karoline smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." Back in the auditorium, Peter Huxley was already fuming. "They handed her the night," he hissed to a colleague. "No," the colleague replied, eyes still on the stage. "She earned it." By the time Karoline reached her hotel room, her phone was buzzing non-stop. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages, and thousands of mentions. Clips of her speech had exploded across social media. One in particular, her final statement about speaking up even when the room is against you, was gaining traction with surprising speed. She opened X. I don't always agree with Karoline Leavitt, but tonight, she showed what leadership looks like. At Independent Voice. They tried to set her up. She walked in with a plan. She walked out with the room. At Campus, reporter number Karoline Leavitt and number She Did Not Back Down were now trending. Even public figures who rarely commented on politics were sharing the video. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit news studio across town, Peter Huxley reviewed the footage grimly. He shook his head. She played us. His producer leaned in. No, Peter. She prepared. You mocked her. She educated the room. His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to losing the spotlight. But tonight, it wasn't his show. It was hers. Karoline sat on the edge of her bed, still in her blazer, watching the numbers climb. She didn't smile. She reflected. Because it wasn't about going viral. It was about being heard. On her terms. Her phone rang. A familiar voice came through. You were brilliant, said a longtime mentor. You didn't fight their way. You made them play your game. Karoline nodded. They invited me thinking I'd be the story. And I gave them one. She looked out the window at the city lights below, her cross necklace catching the faint reflection of the screen beside her. Tomorrow, critics would twist her words. Supporters would celebrate them. But none of them could erase what really happened. She wasn't invited to be respected. She was invited to be humiliated. Instead, she became unforgettable. The next morning, major headlines rolled in, and Karoline's name was everywhere. Young conservative outsmarts the room. They set a trap. She set a tone. Grace under fire. Karoline Leavitt's viral moment. What started as a controlled media stunt had spun wildly out of the hands of those who'd planned it. The organizers of the Liberty Forum had hoped for a political spectacle, an embarrassing moment, a gaffe, something they could spin into sound bites to discredit her. Instead, she'd delivered a masterclass, in calm, in control, in character. Later that week, an editor from a national magazine reached out. We'd like to feature your story, not just the panel, but how you handled it. Karoline didn't answer right away. She was sitting at a quiet cafe in New Hampshire, away from the cameras, the tweets, the noise. Across from her sat a college freshman, the daughter of an old friend. The young woman said quietly, I watched the whole thing. I never thought someone like me could speak in a room like that. Karoline smiled. You can. You just have to be ready when they hope you're not. That's what the world had misunderstood. She wasn't fearless. She was prepared. She didn't fight fire with fire. She fought manipulation with principle. And that's what made her unforgettable. Later that night, as she reviewed emails and declined several TV interviews, she typed one sentence into her private journal. They wanted a spectacle. I gave them a standard. Because in the end, Karoline didn't need to shout. She didn't need to storm out or break down. She just needed to show up with a plan and the strength to stick to it, even when the room was built to break her. And that made all the difference. They invited her to fall. They gave her the mic, hoping she'd stumble. But Karoline Leavitt didn't walk into that room unprepared. She walked in with clarity, courage, and a plan. And when the moment came, she didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. This story isn't just about outsmarting your critics. It's about showing up when you're underestimated, and turning pressure into power. If this inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Surprising Stories, where real voices rise above noise, and the quietest moments make the loudest impact. See you in the next one.